Life has a way of turning upside down when you least expect it. One day you're living your dream, and the next day you're wondering how everything went so wrong. This is exactly what happened to Maya Rodriguez, a woman who thought she had it all figured out. Maya lived in a small town called Riverside where everyone knew everyone else's business. She had built a successful real estate company from scratch, working 16-hour days and missing countless family dinners to make it happen. Her office sat right on Main Street with big windows that let everyone see her working late into the night. People respected her. They trusted her with their biggest investments, their homes. Her house was the talk of the town. A beautiful Victorian home with a wraparound porch painted in soft yellow with white trim. The garden was always perfectly maintained, with roses climbing up trellises and a small fountain in the center. Inside, everything was carefully chosen. Antique furniture passed down from her grandmother, family photos in silver frames, and a grand piano that had belonged to her mother. Maya's husband, David, worked as an accountant for several local businesses. He was quiet and reliable, the kind of man who always remembered anniversaries and never forgot to take out the trash. They had been married for 12 years, and while they never had children, they seemed content with their life together. Every evening, David would come home from work and they would sit on the porch talking about their day while watching the sunset. But David had a secret that Maya never knew about. While she was building her business and trusting him to handle their finances, he was slowly destroying everything they had worked for. It started small, a $20 bet on a football game with his friends. Then it became $50 on horse races. Before long, he was spending entire weekends at the casino, telling Maya he was visiting his brother in the next town. The gambling addiction grew like a cancer, eating away at their savings without Maya ever knowing. David was smart about hiding it. He would intercept bank statements, create fake documents, and even opened credit cards in both their names without telling her. When Maya asked about their finances, he would show her carefully crafted reports that made everything look fine. She trusted him completely, never thinking to question the man she had shared her life with for over a decade. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in October. Maya was at her office reviewing contracts for a new housing development. When her assistant knocked on the door, she looked worried, holding an envelope in her hands. "This just came for you," she said quietly. "It looks official." Maya opened the envelope and felt her stomach drop. It was a notice from the bank. They were behind on their mortgage payments, not just 1 or 2 payments, but 6 months' worth. The letter said they had 30 days to bring the account current, or face foreclosure proceedings. Her hands shook as she read the amount owed. It was more money than she had in her business account, more than she had ever imagined being behind. She called David immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried his office, but his secretary said he had called in sick. That evening, when David finally came home, Maya was waiting for him in the kitchen with the letter spread out on the table. His face went white when he saw it. "We need to talk," Maya said, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. What followed was the most devastating conversation of Maya's life. David broke down completely, sobbing as he confessed everything. The gambling had started 3 years ago. He had borrowed against their house, maxed out credit cards, and even taken money from his clients' accounts, planning to pay it back when he won big. But the big win never came. Instead, the debts kept growing. "I thought I could fix it," he cried. "I thought if I could just win once, just one big win, I could put everything back and you would never have to know." Maya felt like she was drowning. Not only were they facing foreclosure, but David's theft from his clients meant he would likely face criminal charges. Their reputation in the small town would be destroyed. Everything she had worked for was crumbling. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, court appearances, and desperate attempts to save their home. Maya liquidated her business, sold her car, and borrowed money from every friend and family member who would help. But it wasn't enough. The hole David had dug was too deep. David was arrested on embezzlement charges and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Local accountant sentenced for stealing client funds. Maya's photo was included standing behind David at the courthouse, her face a mask of shock and grief. The town that had once celebrated her success now whispered about her behind closed doors. Former clients avoided her on the street. Friends stopped calling. The isolation was almost as painful as the financial ruin. Maya had to file for bankruptcy to deal with the overwhelming debt. The court appointed a trustee to oversee the sale of all their assets. Every piece of furniture, every family heirloom, every memory-filled object would have to go to pay back what David had stolen. She moved into a small apartment above the town's only diner, working as a waitress to pay the rent. The woman who once sold million-dollar properties was now serving coffee and pie to people who used to seek her business advice. Some customers were kind, but others seemed to enjoy her fall from grace. The auction was scheduled for a cold November morning. Maya knew she had to be there even though every fiber of her being wanted to run away. These weren't just possessions being sold. They were pieces of her life, her history, her identity. She spent the night before the auction walking through her empty house one last time. The rooms echoed with memories. In the living room, she remembered hosting dinner parties where she and David would laugh with friends until midnight. In the kitchen, she recalled the morning routine they had shared for years, him reading the paper while she made coffee. The piano in the corner held the most precious memories. Her mother had taught her to play on that same piano when she was 7 years old. She could still remember the feeling of her small fingers stretching to reach the keys, her mother's patient voice guiding her through simple songs. After her mother died when Maya was in college, the piano became her way of staying connected to her. Maya sat down at the bench and played her mother's favorite song one last time. The melody filled the empty house, and for a moment, she could almost feel her mother's presence beside her. Tears streamed down her face as she played the final notes. The morning of the auction dawned gray and cold. Maya arrived early, watching as strangers walked through her home, picking up her belongings and discussing their value like items in a store. The auctioneer was setting up his podium in the living room, testing his microphone. People from town began arriving around 9 o'clock. Some came looking for bargains, others out of curiosity, and a few seemed to be there just to witness Maya's final humiliation. She recognized many faces, former clients, old friends, neighbors she had known for years. Most avoided eye contact. Maya stood near the back of the crowd, wearing a simple black dress and clutching a small purse that contained almost everything she had left in the world. $37 and the keys to her apartment. She felt exposed and vulnerable, like everyone could see right through her to the shame and failure she carried inside. The auction began with smaller items, kitchen appliances, books, decorative objects. Maya watched as strangers bought pieces of her life for far less than they were worth. A set of china that had belonged to her grandmother sold for $20. A collection of books she had spent years building went for $15. With each sale, Maya felt a piece of herself being stripped away. These weren't just objects. They were the foundation of the life she had built, the symbols of everything she had achieved. Now they were being scattered to the four winds, going home with people who had no idea of their true value. The worst part wasn't the financial loss. It was the feeling of being completely alone in a crowd of people who had once respected her. She could hear whispered conversations around her, people discussing her situation like she wasn't standing right there. "I heard she never knew about the gambling," someone said behind her. "How could she not know?" came the reply. "She must have suspected something." "Well, she's paying for it now, isn't she?" Maya closed her eyes and tried to block out the voices, but they seemed to get louder with each passing minute. The shame was overwhelming, threatening to crush her spirit completely. She had never felt so alone or so defeated in her entire life. As the morning wore on, and more of her possessions were sold, Maya began to understand that this wasn't just about losing her things. This was about losing her identity, her place in the community, her sense of who she was. The successful businesswoman was gone, replaced by someone she didn't recognize, someone who had lost everything and had nowhere left to fall. But sometimes when you think you've lost everything, that's when life surprises you. Sometimes when you're standing at your lowest point, That's when someone unexpected steps forward to remind you that you're not as alone as you think. Maya didn't know it yet, but her story was far from over. In fact, the most important chapter was just about to begin. The auction continued, and Maya felt like she was watching her life being torn apart piece by piece. Each item that went up for sale carried memories that the buyers would never understand. They saw furniture and decorations. She saw her entire world being dismantled. The auctioneer was a thin man with a loud voice who seemed to enjoy the drama of it all. He would hold up each item, describing it in terms that made everything sound cheap and ordinary. When he picked up her mother's jewelry box, he called it a small wooden box with some costume jewelry inside. Maya wanted to scream that it wasn't costume jewelry. Those were her mother's pearls, her grandmother's wedding ring, pieces that had been passed down through generations of strong women. But she stayed silent, standing in the back of the room, like a ghost at her own funeral. The crowd had grown larger as word spread through town about the auction. People love drama, especially when it involves someone who used to be successful. Maya could see phones being raised to take pictures, probably to share on social media. The thought made her sick. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the local flower shop, bid on Maya's dining room table. It was a beautiful piece of oak that Maya and David had bought for their 5th anniversary. They had spent months saving for it, visiting furniture stores and dreaming about the dinner parties they would host. Now Mrs. Patterson was examining it like she was buying vegetables at the market. Solid wood, she told her husband. We could refinish it and sell it in the shop. Maya bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. The table wasn't just wood to her. It was the place where she and David had eaten thousands of meals together, where they had planned their future, where she had spread out real estate contracts and built her business. The bidding started at $50. Maya remembered paying $800 for it. Mrs. Patterson got it for $90. Next came her books. Maya had always been a reader, collecting novels and business books over the years. Her personal library had been one of her greatest joys. On quiet Sunday mornings, she would curl up in her reading chair with a cup of coffee and lose herself in stories about other people's lives. Now those books were being sold in boxes, valued by weight, rather than the knowledge and comfort they contained. A young college student bought 3 boxes of her books for $25. Maya hoped he would at least read them, that they would find a good home where they would be appreciated, but she suspected they would end up resold online or donated to a library book sale. The furniture sales were particularly painful. Each piece told a story that only Maya knew. The rocking chair where she had spent hours reading had been her refuge after difficult days at work. The coffee table had been a housewarming gift from her best friend when she and David first bought the house. The bookshelf had been David's attempt at woodworking, crooked and imperfect but made with love. People examined everything with cold, calculating eyes. They pulled out drawers, tested joints, looked for damage or wear. Maya wanted to tell them, to be gentle, that these pieces had feelings, had lived full lives in her home. But furniture doesn't have feelings, and these people didn't care about the love that had surrounded these objects for years. The worst part was listening to the commentary from the crowd. People weren't trying to be cruel, but their casual remarks cut deep into Maya's already wounded heart. This couch has seen better days, someone said about the sofa where Maya and David had spent countless evenings watching movies. I wouldn't pay more than $20 for that dresser. Another person commented about the piece that had belonged to Maya's grandmother. Everything looks worn out, a woman told her friend. I guess when you can't afford to maintain things, they fall apart. Maya closed her eyes and tried to transport herself somewhere else, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped in this nightmare, forced to watch strangers judge and dismiss the things that had made her house a home. The crowd grew restless as the morning wore on. Some people left after buying what they wanted, but others stayed for the entertainment. Maya could see groups of women whispering and glancing in her direction. She recognized some of them. Former clients, members of the country club she used to belong to, women who had once competed for her attention at social events. Now they looked at her with a mixture of pity and superiority. She could almost read their thoughts. That could never happen to me. I would have known if my husband was gambling. I would have been more careful with money. The judgment in their eyes was almost unbearable. Maya had fallen from grace, and they were here to witness every moment of it. When the auctioneer picked up her exercise equipment, Maya remembered the New Year's resolution she had made, the early morning workouts when she was trying to balance her career with staying healthy. The equipment sold for less than she had paid for 1 month at the gym. Her kitchen items went quickly. The stand mixer that had helped her bake countless birthday cakes for friends and neighbors sold for $15. The set of knives that David had given her for Christmas went for $8. Pots and pans that had cooked thousands of meals were bundled together and sold as a lot for $12. Each sale felt like a small death. These weren't just possessions. They were the tools she had used to build a life, to create memories, to show love to the people who mattered to her. Now they were being redistributed to strangers who would never know their history. The piano was scheduled to be sold after lunch, and Maya dreaded that moment more than any other. She had already decided she would leave before then. She couldn't bear to watch someone bid on the instrument that connected her to her mother, that had been her solace during difficult times, that had filled her house with music and joy for so many years. But first came her personal items, and those were somehow even more painful than the furniture. Her wedding dress was among the items laid out on tables near the front of the room. Maya had forgotten it was even being sold until she saw it hanging there, preserved in its protective bag. She had worn it only once, on the happiest day of her life, when she truly believed that love could conquer anything. The dress was beautiful. Simple but elegant, with delicate lace and tiny pearl buttons down the back. Maya's mother had helped her choose it, spending an entire day visiting bridal shops until they found the perfect one. Her mother had cried when Maya tried it on, saying she looked like a princess. Now it hung there like a ghost, a reminder of dreams that had turned into nightmares. Maya wondered who would buy it, what kind of story it would become part of next. Would another young woman wear it on her wedding day, full of hope and love? Or would it end up in someone's attic, forgotten, and gathering dust? The jewelry was displayed in cases looking smaller and less impressive than Maya remembered. Her engagement ring had already been sold months ago to help pay legal fees, but there were other pieces. A watch David had given her for their 10th anniversary, earrings she had bought to celebrate her first big real estate sale, a necklace that had been her mother's. People picked up the jewelry, examining it under the lights, discussing whether it was real gold or just plated. Maya wanted to tell them the stories behind each piece, but she knew it wouldn't matter. To them, it was just merchandise. A woman Maya didn't recognize was looking at her mother's necklace, holding it up to the light and frowning at the clasp. "The chain is a little worn," she told her husband, "but it's real gold. Might be worth fixing." Maya's heart broke a little more. That necklace had been her mother's pride and joy, worn to every special occasion. The worn clasp came from decades of being put on and taken off by loving hands. It wasn't damage. It was evidence of a life well lived. The photographs were the hardest to see being sold. Albums full of family pictures, vacation memories, and milestone moments were stacked on tables like used books. Maya knew that most of them would probably be thrown away. Who wants to buy someone else's memories? She thought about all the people in those photos who had no idea their images were being sold to strangers. Her parents, who had worked hard their entire lives to build a better future for their daughter. David's family, who had welcomed her with open arms. Friends who had shared adventures and celebrations that were now being sold by the pound. The crowd was growing more restless and cruel as the day wore on. Some people seemed to be enjoying the spectacle of Maya's downfall a little too much. She heard comments that were clearly meant to hurt. "I always thought she was too proud for her own good," someone said loudly enough for Maya to hear. "Karma has a way of catching up to people," another person added. "I heard she knew about the gambling and just didn't care because she was making good money," a third voice chimed in. Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. None of that was true, but the truth didn't matter anymore. People believed what they wanted to believe, and right now they wanted to believe that she somehow deserved this humiliation. She thought about leaving, just walking out and never looking back. but something kept her rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the need to witness the complete destruction of her old life before she could begin to build a new one. Maybe it was a stubborn refusal to let these people drive her away from what remained of her own story. After the lunch break, the crowd returned even larger than before. Word had spread through town about the auction, and people were curious to see what would happen next. Maya had spent the break sitting in her car, gathering the courage to go back inside for the most painful part of the day. The piano sat in the center of the living room like a beautiful, silent monument to better times. The auctioneer had positioned it where everyone could see it clearly, and the afternoon light streaming through the windows made the polished wood gleam. It was easily the most valuable item in the house, and Maya could see people examining it with serious interest. A local music teacher was there with her husband, running her hands over the keys and testing the sound. Maya recognized her from school concerts and community events. She was a good woman who would take care of the piano, but it still hurt to think of someone else playing the songs that had meant so much to Maya and her mother. There was also a man Maya didn't recognize, probably from out of town, who seemed to know a lot about pianos. He was looking underneath it, checking the strings and hammers, asking technical questions about its age and maintenance. He had the look of someone who bought and sold instruments for a living. Maya found a spot near the back wall where she could see everything, but hopefully remain unnoticed. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together the pieces of her breaking heart. The auctioneer called for attention and began describing the piano. He talked about its brand, its age, and its condition, treating it like any other piece of furniture. Maya wanted to interrupt, to tell everyone about the music that had filled the house, about her mother's gentle hands guiding her through her first lessons, about the comfort the piano had provided during the darkest days after her mother's death. But she stayed silent, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. The bidding started at $200. Maya felt sick. She knew the piano was worth at least 10 times that amount. But in a small-town auction, things rarely sold for their true value. The music teacher bid $250. The out-of-town dealer went to $300. A few other people joined in, pushing the price up slowly. Maya watched the numbers climb and felt a tiny bit of relief that at least people recognized the piano's value. But then something happened that Maya wasn't expecting. The bidding reached $800 and most people dropped out. Only the music teacher and the dealer were left, going back and forth in $50 increments. The teacher's husband was looking worried, probably thinking about their budget. At $950, the teacher shook her head and stepped back. The dealer smiled, thinking he had won. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once at $950, he called out. Going twice. $1,000. The voice came from the back of the room, quiet but clear. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. Maya looked around, confused, until she saw a man she hadn't noticed before raising his hand. He was probably in his early 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, but there was something about his posture that suggested strength and confidence. Maya had never seen him before, which was unusual in a town where everyone knew everyone. The dealer looked annoyed but raised his bid to $1,100. The stranger didn't hesitate. $1,200, he said calmly. Maya found herself holding her breath. There was something different about this man, something that set him apart from everyone else in the room. While others had been examining her, possessions with calculating eyes looking for bargains and flaws, he seemed to understand that these items had meaning beyond their monetary value. The dealer shook his head and walked away, apparently deciding the piano wasn't worth more than $1,200 to him. The music teacher looked disappointed but resigned. Sold for $1,200, the auctioneer announced, pointing to the stranger. Please see the clerk to arrange payment and pickup. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. At least the piano was going to someone who had been willing to pay a fair price for it. She hoped he would take good care of it, that it would bring music and joy to his home the way it had to hers. But then the stranger did something completely unexpected. Instead of going to the clerk's table, he walked directly toward Maya. The crowd parted as he moved through the room, and conversations grew quiet as people wondered what was happening. Maya's heart started beating faster as he approached. Up, close. She could see that his eyes were a warm brown, filled with a kindness that seemed genuine. There were lines around them that suggested he smiled often, and his hands looked like they belonged to someone who worked with them, someone who built things rather than destroyed them. "Excuse me," he said quietly when he reached her. "Are you Maya Rodriguez?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. "My name is Oliver Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I'm very sorry for what you're going through today." Maya shook his hand, surprised by the gentleness of his grip. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "I bought your piano," Oliver said, "but I think there's been a mistake. It doesn't belong to me." Maya looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand." Oliver glanced around at the crowd that was watching their conversation with intense curiosity. "Could we step outside for a moment? This is a private matter." Maya followed him out to the front porch, grateful to escape the stares and whispers. The November air was cold, but it felt refreshing after the stuffy atmosphere inside. "I know this might sound strange," Oliver said, "but I'd like to give the piano back to you." Maya stared at him in shock. "What? No, I can't. You paid for it. It's yours now." "I paid for it because I could see what it meant to you," Oliver said gently. "I watched you during the auction, and when that piano came up for sale, I saw the pain in your eyes. No one should have to watch their memories being sold to strangers." Maya felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand. Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Oliver was quiet for a moment, looking out at the street where cars were parked and people were loading their purchases. "2 years ago I lost my wife to cancer," he said finally. "After she died, I had to sell our house and most of our things. I know what it feels like to watch your life being picked apart by strangers who don't understand what any of it means." "I'm so sorry," Maya said, her heart aching for this kind stranger who had experienced his own devastating loss. "The difference is that I chose to sell those things," Oliver continued. "You didn't have a choice, and I noticed that no one here today seemed to care about that." Maya looked back through the window at the crowd inside, still bidding on what remained of her possessions. "They think I deserve this," she said quietly. "They think I should have known what my husband was doing." "What people think doesn't matter," Oliver said firmly. "What matters is who you are, and I can see that you're a good person going through the worst time of your life." Maya wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept charity. I have nothing left to give you in return." Oliver smiled, and Maya could see why his eyes had laugh lines. It was a warm smile that reached all the way to his eyes and made her feel, for the first time in months, like she wasn't completely alone in the world. "Who said anything about charity?" he asked. "I'm a carpenter, and I just moved to town to start over after my wife died. I bought a workshop with an apartment upstairs, but the apartment is empty, and I have no idea how to organize an office or manage the business side of things. From what I heard, you used to run a successful real estate company." Maya nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. "What if we made a deal?" Oliver suggested. "You keep your piano, and in exchange, you help me get my business organized. I need someone who understands contracts, marketing, customer relations, all the things you know how to do." Maya felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership," Oliver corrected. "A chance for both of us to start over, to build something new from the pieces of our old lives." Maya looked back at the house where strangers were still buying the remnants of her former life. Then she looked at Oliver, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and was offering her something she had thought was lost forever, a future. "Why would you trust me?" she asked. "Everyone in town knows about the bankruptcy, about David's crimes. My reputation is ruined." "Your husband's crimes aren't your crimes," Oliver said simply. "And from what I can see, your reputation should be for surviving something that would have destroyed most people. That's exactly the kind of strength I need in a business partner." Maya felt more tears coming, but these were different from the tears she had been crying all day. These tears came from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't going to face the future alone. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Oliver said with another one of those warm smiles. "Let's go back in there and get your piano. Then we can start planning how to move it to your new home." As they walked back into the house together, Maya felt the stares and heard the whispers of the crowd. But for the first time all day, she didn't. The coffee shop on Main Street was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon. Maya sat across from Oliver Chen, still trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. Her hands wrapped around a warm mug, and for the first time, in months, she felt a small sense of peace. Oliver had insisted on buying her coffee after they arranged for the piano to be delivered to his workshop. He said they needed to talk properly, away from the gossip and stares of the auction crowd. Maya was grateful for the quiet space and the chance to really look at this man who had changed everything with a simple act of kindness. "I still can't believe you did that," Maya said, shaking her head. "Buying the piano just to give it back to me. It's the most generous thing anyone has ever done for me." Oliver smiled and stirred his coffee slowly. "It wasn't just generosity," he said. "It was recognition. I saw something in you today that reminded me of myself 2 years ago." "What did you see?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "Strength," Oliver said without hesitation. "You stood in that room for hours, watching your entire life being sold piece by piece, and you never broke down. You never screamed or caused a scene or begged people to stop. You faced it with dignity, even when people were being cruel." Maya felt her eyes fill with tears again. "I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was dying inside." "That's exactly what I mean," Oliver said gently. "Real strength isn't about not feeling pain, it's about feeling the pain and continuing to stand anyway. That's what you did today." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the coffee machine and the distant sound of traffic outside. Maya studied Oliver's face, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he chose his words, the calm presence that seemed to surround him like a protective bubble. "Tell me about your wife," Maya said softly. "If you want to, I mean. You don't have to." Oliver's expression grew tender, and Maya could see the love that still lived in his heart. "Her name was Lynn," he said. "We were married for 22 years. She was a teacher, and she had this amazing ability to see the best in everyone, especially the kids that other people had given up on." He pulled out his wallet and showed Maya a photograph of a beautiful Asian woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. She was standing in what looked like a classroom, surrounded by children who were all laughing at something she had said. "She's beautiful," Maya said, meaning it. "She looks like someone who could light up a room just by walking into it." "She could," Oliver agreed, his voice filled with warmth and sadness. "Even when she was sick, even during the worst parts of the treatment, she never lost that light. The kids would send her cards and flowers, and she would insist on writing back to every single one of them." Maya felt her heart ache for this man who had clearly loved his wife deeply. "How long was she sick?" 3 years, Oliver said. "Breast cancer. We fought it together, went through all the treatments, held on to hope for as long as we could. But in the end," he trailed off, looking out the window. "I'm so sorry," Maya said, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. "That must have been devastating." Oliver nodded. "It was. But you know what the hardest part was? After she died, everyone expected me to move on quickly. They said I was young enough to start over, that Lynn would want me to be happy. They meant well, but they didn't understand that I didn't want to start over. I wanted my old life back." Maya understood that feeling completely. "Yes," she said, quietly. "People keep telling me this is a fresh start, a chance to build something new. But I don't want something new. I want my old life, before everything went wrong." "Exactly," Oliver said, his eyes meeting hers with understanding. "But here's what I learned. We don't get to go back. The only choice we have is whether to move forward or stay stuck in the past. So what made you decide to move forward? Maya asked. Oliver was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Lynn did, he said finally. Not directly, but through something she left behind. About a month before she died, she wrote me a letter. She made me promise not to read it until I was ready to start living again instead of just surviving. When did you read it? 6 months ago, Oliver admitted. I carried it around for almost 2 years before I had the courage to open it. What did it say? Maya asked, then quickly added, If it's too personal, you don't have to tell me. Oliver smiled sadly. She said she wasn't worried about me being sad. She knew I would grieve and she wanted me to, but she was worried about me being angry. She said anger would make me bitter and bitterness would steal whatever good years I had left. Maya felt those words hit her like a physical blow. She had been carrying so much anger, at David for his lies, at herself for not seeing the signs, at the people in town who judged her, at life for being so unfair. She also said something that changed everything for me. Oliver continued. She said that the love we shared wasn't gone just because she was gone. It was still here. He touched his chest, and the only way to honor that love was to use it to help other people. Is that why you helped me today? Maya asked. Partly, Oliver admitted. But also because I recognize a fellow survivor when I see one. We've both lost everything we thought defined us. We've both been forced to discover who we are when everything else is stripped away. Maya thought about that for a moment. Who are you when everything else is stripped away? Oliver considered the question seriously. I'm someone who builds things, he said. Not just furniture and cabinets, but solutions to problems. Beauty where there was ugliness, functionality where there was chaos. That's what I've always done, even when I didn't realize it. And who am I? Maya asked, more to herself than to Oliver. You're someone who creates connections, Oliver said without hesitation. I watched you at that auction. Even in the middle of your own pain, you were aware of everyone around you. You noticed the music teacher's disappointment, the dealer's greed, the crowd's cruelty. You see people, really see them, that's a gift. Maya had never thought of herself that way, but as Oliver spoke, she began to remember moments from her real estate career that had nothing to do with money or success. The first-time homebuyers she had guided through the process with extra patience. The elderly couple she had helped find a smaller home near their children. The young family she had spent weekends showing houses to until they found the perfect one. I loved helping people find their homes, she said slowly. Not just houses, but places where they could build their lives, where they could be happy. See? Oliver said with a smile. That's exactly what I mean. And that's why I think we could work well together. Tell me more about your business, Maya said, leaning forward with interest. Oliver's eyes lit up. I specialize in custom woodworking and furniture restoration. I love taking something that's broken or unwanted and making it beautiful again. Old tables, damaged cabinets, family heirlooms that people think are beyond saving. I give them new life. Maya felt a chill of recognition. You take broken things and make them whole again. Yes, Oliver said, then paused as he realized the deeper meaning of his words. I suppose I do. They looked at each other across the small table, and Maya felt something shift between them. This wasn't just about a job or a business arrangement. This was about two people who understood brokenness and the possibility of healing. The workshop is about 10 minutes from here, Oliver said. Would you like to see it? Maya nodded, suddenly, eager to see this place that might become her new beginning. Oliver's workshop was housed in a converted barn on the outskirts of town. As they pulled up to the building, Maya could see that it had been beautifully restored, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and a small apartment built into the upper level. Inside, the workshop was organized but lived in. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, lumber was stacked according to type and size, and works in progress occupied several workbenches. The smell of wood shavings and finishing oil filled the air, creating an atmosphere that was both productive and peaceful. This is amazing, Maya said, running her hand along a half-finished dining table. You built all of this? Most of it, Oliver said with obvious pride. That table is for a young couple getting married next month. The bride's grandfather built their first table 50 years ago, but it was damaged in a flood. I'm recreating it from old photographs. Maya could see the love and care that went into every piece. This wasn't just craftsmanship. It was artistry with heart. And upstairs is the apartment? She asked. Oliver nodded and led her up a narrow staircase to a small but comfortable living space. It had a kitchenette, a bathroom, and one large room that could serve as both living area and bedroom. The windows looked out over fields and trees, offering a view that was peaceful and private. It's not much, Oliver said, but it's clean and quiet, and it comes with the job if you're interested. Maya walked to the window and looked out at the view. For the first time in months, she could imagine herself somewhere, building a life, finding peace. What exactly would my job be? She asked. Whatever you think needs doing, Oliver said. I'm good with my hands, but I'm terrible at the business side of things. I need help with contracts, scheduling, customer service, marketing, all the things that make the difference between a hobby and a real business. 6 months later, Maya stood in the workshop that had become so much more than just a place of business. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, casting warm light across the latest project, a beautiful oak bookshelf that would soon hold someone's treasured collection of stories. The transformation had been remarkable, both in the business and in Maya herself. What had started as a simple arrangement between two broken people had grown into something neither of them had expected, a thriving partnership that was healing them both. Maya had thrown herself into organizing Oliver's business with the same passion she had once put into real estate. She created systems for everything: customer inquiries, project timelines, supplier relationships, and financial management. What had been a one-man operation struggling to stay afloat was now a respected business with a waiting list of customers. But the real magic happened when Maya suggested they expand beyond just custom furniture. She had noticed how many people brought in family heirlooms that were damaged or neglected, hoping Oliver could save them. These pieces often had deep emotional value far beyond their monetary worth. We should specialize in restoration, Maya had suggested one evening as they reviewed the day's appointments. Not just making new furniture, but bringing old pieces back to life. There's something beautiful about saving things that other people have given up on. Oliver had smiled at her words, understanding the deeper meaning immediately. Like what happened to us, he had said quietly. Exactly like what happened to us, Maya had agreed. The restoration side of the business had taken off beyond their wildest expectations. Word spread through the community and beyond about the carpenter and his partner who could work miracles on damaged furniture. People drove from neighboring towns, bringing hope along with their broken treasures. Maya had developed a gift for understanding the stories behind each piece. She would sit with customers, learning about the history of their furniture, understanding what it meant to them. A rocking chair where 3 generations of mothers had nursed their babies. A dining table that had hosted 50 years of family gatherings. A dresser that had belonged to a beloved grandmother. These weren't just restoration projects, they were acts of preservation, ways of honoring family history and keeping memories alive. Maya would document each piece's story, creating beautiful portfolios that customers could keep alongside their restored furniture. The apartment above the workshop had become Maya's sanctuary. It was small but perfect, filled with light and peace. The piano sat in the corner, looking as beautiful as ever, and Maya had begun playing again. The music that filled the small space in the evenings was different now, less melancholy, more hopeful. Oliver often worked late in the shop below, and the sound of Maya's piano became the soundtrack to his evening hours. Sometimes he would stop working just to listen, remembering his wife's words about love not disappearing but transforming into something new. The relationship between Maya and Oliver had evolved naturally from partnership to friendship to something deeper. They never rushed it, never forced it, but simply allowed it to grow at its own pace. Both of them had learned that the best things in life couldn't be hurried. Oliver was different from David in every way that mattered. Where David had been secretive, Oliver was transparent. Where David had been reckless, Oliver was steady. Where David had hidden his problems, Oliver shared his struggles and celebrated his victories with Maya. "I've never had a real partner before," Oliver had told her one evening as they sat on the small porch outside the apartment, watching the sunset. "Lynn and I loved each other deeply, but we lived somewhat separate lives. She had her teaching, I had my woodworking. We came together at the end of each day, but we didn't really build anything together." Maya understood what he meant. Her marriage to David had been similar. Two people living parallel lives under the same roof, but not truly connected in their daily work and dreams. "This feels different," Maya had said. "Like we're building something together that's bigger than what either of us could create alone," and they were. The business had become a reflection of both their strengths, Oliver's craftsmanship and Maya's business sense, his patience and her energy, his artistic eye and her understanding of people. The town's attitude toward Maya had gradually shifted, as well. At first, people had been skeptical of her partnership with the newcomer. Some had whispered that she was taking advantage of his kindness, that she was using him to rebuild her reputation. But as months passed and the quality of their work became undeniable, respect began to replace suspicion. Customers started specifically requesting Maya's input on their projects. Other business owners began asking for her advice. The woman who had once been whispered about as a failure was now recognized as someone who had turned her life around through determination and hard work. Maya had also begun volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic business skills to people who were starting their own small enterprises. Many of her students were people who had faced their own setbacks, job losses, divorces, financial difficulties. Maya found that her experience with failure made her a better teacher than her old success had ever done. "You understand what it's like to start over," one of her students had told her after a particularly helpful session. "That makes all the difference." Maya realized that her greatest strengths now came from her deepest wounds. The humiliation she had endured had given her empathy. The loss she had experienced had taught her resilience. The judgment she had faced had shown her the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The piano had become central to her healing process. In the months after the auction, Maya had been afraid to play, worried that the music would bring back too many painful memories. But gradually she had begun to rediscover the joy that music had once brought to her life. She started with simple pieces, children's songs her mother had taught her. Then she moved on to classical pieces she had learned as a teenager. Eventually, she began playing songs that she and David had enjoyed together, finding that the music now held beauty without the crushing weight of loss. Oliver often requested specific songs in the evenings. His favorites were the gentle, melodic pieces that seemed to fill the workshop with peace. Sometimes Maya would play while he worked, creating a harmony between music and craftsmanship that felt perfectly natural. One evening in late spring, as Maya finished playing a particularly beautiful piece, Oliver appeared at the top of the stairs to the apartment. "That was lovely," he said, as he always did. "Thank you," Maya replied, closing the piano bench. "It's getting easier to play the sad songs without feeling sad myself." Oliver sat down beside her on the bench, something he had never done before. "Maya," he said quietly, "I have something I want to ask you." Maya's heart began beating faster, sensing the importance of whatever was coming next. "We've been partners in business for 6 months now," Oliver continued, "and friends for even longer, but I've been thinking about something Lynn wrote in her letter that I haven't told you about." "What did she say?" Maya asked gently. Oliver took a deep breath. "She said that if I ever found someone who made me want to share my life again, someone who understood both loss and hope, I shouldn't be afraid to love again. She said that would be the greatest honor I could give to our love, using it as a foundation to build something new." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, understanding where this conversation was heading. "I love you, Maya," Oliver said simply, "not because you're like Lynn, but because you're completely yourself. I love your strength, your kindness, your ability to see beauty in broken things. I love the way you've rebuilt your life and helped me rebuild mine." Maya reached for his hands, holding them gently. I love you too, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I never thought I would be able to trust someone again, to open my heart again. But you've shown me that love doesn't have to be scary when it's built on honesty and respect. Oliver smiled. That warm smile that had first caught Maya's attention at the auction. Would you marry me? He asked. Not because we're afraid to be alone, but because we're better together than we are apart. Maya laughed through her tears. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you. Oliver pulled out a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. I had this made, he said. The stone is from Lynn's engagement ring, reset into something new. She would have wanted it to be part of our beginning. Maya slipped the ring onto her finger, marveling at how perfectly it fit. The gesture felt like a blessing from the past and a promise for the future all at once. They were married 6 weeks later in the workshop, surrounded by the furniture they had, restored together and the friends they had made in their new life. Maya wore a simple dress that she had bought for the occasion, choosing to start fresh rather than trying to reclaim symbols from her past. The ceremony was small but perfect, filled with people who had watched their love story unfold and cheered for their happiness. Even some of Maya's former clients came, having overcome their initial judgment, to see the strength and grace with which she had rebuilt her life.